The proposed site for the new medical clinic in Springfield, Ohio is approximately 60,000 square feet. The building is proposed to be a one-story, 30,000 square foot brick veneer structure with a steel frame and open web steel joists. The zoning code calls for a parking lot of 60 cars, but upon receipt of the survey, it becomes clear that the site is currently approximately 40% wetland. What should the architect propose to do? So think about that for a second. We have 60,000 square feet site. So I'm just going to randomly draw a site and say that's 60,000 square feet. We've got a 30,000 square foot building on that site, and we have a parking lot for 60 cars. So how big is a parking lot for 60 cars? Well, the simple way to do that is you can multiply somewhere between 300 to 350 square feet per car. So let's say 300 times 60. What do you get?
I'm going with 1,800.
18,000. 18,000 square feet. That would be the minimum it would be, because it's actually probably a little higher. That's why the 350 is there. So if we round it out to about 20,000 square feet, then we start adding that together. We have 20,000 square foot parking lot, a 30,000 square foot building, and then that's 50,000 square feet of built on land, and then that only leaves 10,000 square feet left for open site land that is currently 40% wetland. So the building and the parking lot together are absolutely going to take over wetland space, is what we've figured out from that calculation. And by the way, before I move on, just a quick thing about the parking. Remember, you can always just figure it out too. I mean, I had this number memorized, this 300 to 350, which is a good one to memorize. But remember, a parking space is, 9 feet by 19 feet. And then there's 24 feet aisleway, sometimes can be a little bit less. And then I have parking on the other side again. So you can start to figure that out. That would be 62 feet times 9 times 30, because it would be 30 cars on each side. And if we did that calculation out, that would end up being right about 18,000. It would actually be, I think, 17,200 or something like that. But you also have the driveways and other backup spaces and things, so it would add up to about 18,000 plus driveways, which is the number that we used. So you can always just figure it out if you need to. But those are the numbers. So what we're saying here is we've got more built area in terms of parking and building on this 60,000 square foot site than can just accommodate a 40% of that site being wetland. So now let's look at the possible answers. A, carefully plan the infill process so that the wetlands will recreate themselves in a new location upstream. That sounds interesting. B, the project will have to get permission to buy land elsewhere and build new wetlands in another location and produce an environmental impact report showing how compliance will be met. C, the project will fit without damaging the wetlands. Well, we actually just figured out that that's actually not going to be the case. So that can't be. Design the wetland, this is D, design the wetland stormwater retention area to go under the parking lot in a precast concrete vault. So using the space of the parking lot and let that be the wetland and stormwater retention system for the site. So that sounds interesting. So the only one we've definitely crossed off is C. Now we have to start thinking about this a little bit more. So who is going to be interested in the wetlands? Well, the wetlands are part of the overall watershed of an area, meaning water moves across the land in various ways, underground, in rivers, in creeks, on lakes, and in wetlands. And you can't just mess with a wetland without sort of messing with the overall environmental impact on an area. So the Environmental Impact Agency, Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, is very concerned about these issues, both at the state level and at the national level. But also, wetlands are part of a certain set of flora and fauna. So we're going to have certain animals are going to thrive in wetlands, other animals are not. Certain plants are going to thrive in wetlands and won't in other locations. So they're important from that environmental standpoint as well. So let's look at D for a second. Design the wetland stormwater retention area to go under the parking lot in a precast concrete vault. That's a completely reasonable answer for stormwater retention. But I can't really use that as my wetland because birds can't come and nest in your parking lot underneath in the concrete vault. Wetland plants can't grow in underneath your parking lot. Like, it's only doing one of the things that a wetland has to do. And that the one thing it would do is it could potentially be part of an overall watershed. So the fact that it doesn't meet enough of the wetland issues means that D is not a reasonable answer either. So now it's between A and B. So A says carefully plan the infill process so that the wetlands will recreate themselves in a new location upstream. So in other words, you just start building up your site and pushing the wetland back. Well, what you're really doing is you're pushing the wetland onto somebody else's property. Does that seem like it's going to be a good plan? Like, when you say it that way, it becomes pretty clear. Yeah, A can't work. You can't just make somebody else's property a wetland. That's just not viable. So the actual probable answer here is B. The project will have to get permission to buy land elsewhere, build a new wetland in another location, and then produce an environmental impact report that shows that this will actually work. Doesn't mean you can produce a wetland anywhere. It has to be someplace that actually would be useful in the overall watershed. So if you're going to sort of fill over an old wetland, it's essentially saying either don't, and you have to find a way to fit onto the site. Maybe I put the parking lot below the building or something like that. Or you have to find some way that you're going to replace that wetland in a way that actually is meaningful to the wetland system. Hopefully that's clear. It's a tricky one. It's very expensive, which is why people are very nervous about getting too close to wetlands. And the specific definition of what the wetland is a huge issue.